Hello, Wonderhusy here, standing at the side of the road in Bisbee, Arizona. Not Frisbee, Bisbee. Okay, it's kind of a funny name, and it's an absolutely fascinating place way down in far southeastern Arizona, only about 11 miles from the Mexican border. And as you can probably tell by the beautifully colored piles of dirt and rock around me, Bisbee owes its existence to mining. That's right, it's another one of them classic Old West mining towns. But Bisbee wasn't just another mining town, it was the site of the biggest copper mine in Arizona. And you can still peer into the giant pit left behind by the miners to this day. This is called the Lavender Pit, and golly, I don't know how big it is or what its capacity is, but it's a big dang pit, and it's right in the middle of town. Actually, there's some informational signage here, and it says that this pit is 4,000 feet wide, 5,000 feet long, and 850 feet deep at its maximum. And it says that open pit mining here began in 1917 and went all the way until 1974. Isn't that wild? There was apparently enough copper in this area to sustain a copper mine for over 50 years. But nowadays it's just sort of a tourist attraction with a scenic overlook and a monument dedicated to all the veterans who served in World War II from Bisbee. And there's a plaque explaining that the name Lavender Pit comes from this dude, Harrison M. Lavender. Notably absent is any kind of memorial or monument to all the striking miners who were deported from here back in 1917. Okay, Arizona doesn't play around now or back then, and so I guess a bunch of miners tried to organize and strike for better working conditions, and who can blame them? It couldn't have been very pleasant being a copper miner. But Arizona wouldn't have any of it, and I guess they rounded up all the strikers, loaded them on a train, and dumped them in the desert without food and water. I don't know how many 100 miles from here. Same thing happened up in Jerome, Arizona, apparently, another mining town. I guess Arizona just doesn't have no truck with commies or protesters. Anyway, I must have been to something like 975 different busted historic old mining towns in the course of my travels. But unlike any other mining town I've been to, Bisbee has done something completely different. Okay, the Lavender Pit mine was operated by the Phelps Dodge Mining Company, and even though they closed this mine down in 1974, well, instead of just shriveling up and dying like all these other mining towns I've been to, Bisbee managed to totally reinvent itself as an artist's colony. And I'm telling you, this is one of the most amazing reinventions of a place I've ever seen. Let's go check it out. Okay, this is an amazing example of what all those other busted, funky little historic mining towns could aspire to. This is Bisbee in 2025, 50 years after the mine closed. And as you can see, business is booming. Okay, I guess the population is only about 5,000 people, and that's only about half of what it was in its peak in 1960. Okay, even though the town has technically been here since 1880, that's when, I guess, copper, gold, and silver were first discovered here in the Mural Mountains. That's the name of this mountain range that Bisbee lies nestled in, the Mural Mountains. Well, even though they first found copper, gold, and silver here back in 1880, and that's when the town was technically founded, it kind of had its ups and downs over the years, and it didn't reach peak population until 1960. But then when that mine closed down in 74, 75, well, obviously a bunch of people left town because there weren't any more jobs. So what's a town to do when your main employer shuts down if you don't want the town to just dry up and blow away? Well, in this case, you reinvent yourself as an artist's colony. And that's exactly what happened. Okay, I guess back in the 1970s, property values were super duper low. In fact, there was this fancy once grand hotel that was owned by the mining company that they were trying to sell for $1. I guess it was in pretty rough shape. Well, with property values that low, who do you think you're gonna attract? Artists and hippies. And that's exactly what happened. This artist and his wife bought the hotel and fixed it up, and that was kind of the beginning of the reimagination of Bisbee as an artist colony. Okay, you can see here in the town park in front of the historical museum, there's a bunch of old mining equipment on display. But it's just for show, it's just relics, because the economy here now is pretty much 100% driven by tourism. And walking around, it's super easy to see why, because this is like the quaintest, most picturesque and funkiest town I've ever been to. And that's saying something. Okay, I guess that is the old historic Copper Queen Hotel, which was the first building to be bought by artists and kind of started the whole movement. And it's really interesting to me to imagine how that happens. It just takes one guy to come in and buy a busted old hotel for $1 and then spend a bunch of money fixing it up. And then I guess that one guy kind of starts a domino effect, and then another artist moves in and fixes up another building, and then another artist moves in and fixes up another building, and then, well, before you know it, you have chess tables in the park and art galleries on every corner. But you still see people walking down the street toting sledgehammers. So anyway, this artist couple moved here and renovated the Copper Queen Hotel, but, well, golly, that's just one building. How did this whole town get redeveloped? Well, the answer is actually really interesting. Okay, I guess the artist and his wife fixed up this hotel and a couple other buildings, and that was enough to attract the attention of a developer who shared their vision, and so I guess he bought up a bunch of real estate. And then John Wayne, of all people, got involved, okay? John Wayne, the famous cowboy actor and icon of Western masculinity. I guess he'd been coming to Bisbee on and off for years, and he liked the idea of redeveloping it, even though it ended up becoming a hotbed of hippies and artists, which I can't imagine John Wayne was a very big fan of. But that's exactly what happened. Because the property values were so low, all these hippie artist types started moving here. In fact, you can see this mural here on the side of this building. There's a ton of amazing public art and murals here in Bisbee today. Anyway, they all moved here and started this scene that really took off. I mean, like I said, I've been to a bunch of these old mining towns that I feel like have the potential to become something like this, like Beatty, Nevada, or Goldfield, Nevada. I mean, either one of those would be amazing artist colonies. I don't know what makes one town successfully reinvent itself and another town just sort of crumble into dust. I guess it takes the involvement of John Wayne. Anyway, you can see this is the kind of town where there's now morning yoga and meditation classes and shows by Big Dick, which is the best name for a Little Richard tribute band I've ever read. There's a ton of live music here. There's a bunch of funky little bars, galleries, restaurants, coffee shops, art museums. We got an old bomb. We've got a magic show. And we've got a whole bunch of bars, including this one, St. Elmo, which I think is the oldest bar in Bisbee. The sign says it's been open since 1902, and I believe it because I went there the other night with my friend who lives here. That's right, I'm visiting a friend who lives in Bisbee, and so he kind of took me around and showed me the sights, and we went into the St. Elmo for a drink, and it was wild. And then there's also this bar across the street in the Silver King Hotel that, according to the sign out front, is the smallest bar in Arizona. Look at that. The sign is kind of shaped like a keyhole, I guess, like you're peeking through a keyhole. The Room 4 Bar. Arizona's smallest bar. But it's not just the nightlife that brings people here. It's also all the antiques and art galleries and just the funkiness and the character of this place. I mean, look how it's well, first of all, it's built up on a hill, so you can see there's houses going all up the sides, and we'll go check some of them out. But then there's this remnant of a busted old building that is covered in graffiti, and there's a pair of boots hanging from the power line. Actually, it looks like there's more than one pair of shoes hanging from the power lines, and what can I say? That's Bisbee. This is just one of those funky, quirky tourist towns that are so much fun to walk around and explore, especially because Bisbee was built back in 1880. I guess the streets were laid out before the automobile was a thing, so everything is extremely walkable. And because it's nestled in the Mural Mountains, it's real hilly, and there's all these funky little staircases connecting one street to another. Or you can see here, this says Bisbee 1000. Well, that's actually the name of a big race they have here every year, kind of like a marathon, but instead of a marathon, because Bisbee is such a vertical city, you have to run, I guess, up 1,000 stairs, which honestly sounds even harder than running a marathon. Anyway, there's a ton of funky little businesses here, coffee shops, restaurants, galleries, antique stores. But even if you're like me, on what you might call the frugal side, there's plenty of interesting stuff to see just walking around Bisbee for free. Like this random alleyway full of art. Look at this. It's another one of these staircases that leads from one street up to the next, but the entire thing is covered in all kinds of crazy paintings. I'm gonna have to zoom out just to get the scope of this thing. Look at that. Almost every square inch of the side of this building is covered in really cool, colorful art. Or at least I think it's super cool. I guess there might be some people watching this video that go, why couldn't they just leave it the way it was, all nice and historical and rusty? Well, I take your point, and that's what I do like about towns like Goldfield or Beatty, is there's still a lot of really busted stuff laying around. But trust me, there's still plenty of that stuff laying around in Bisbee too. It's just, I don't know, augmented by all these funky artistic touches. You know what I mean? It's kind of like San Francisco of the desert. A lot of the features of Bisbee remind me of San Francisco. The fact that it's built on a hill, the fact that it's full of artists and hippies and weirdos. But unlike San Francisco, where it's chilly and foggy and damp 11 and a half months out of the year, we're here in the desert and it's warm and sunny. And it doesn't even get that hot down here in the summertime because we're at, I think we're about a mile high. So it stays relatively cool. Oh, look how cool this is. The handles of these doors are made out of old pickaxes. I love that. I'm getting all kinds of ideas here for improvements that we could make at our Death Valley compound. You know, my sister and I love this kind of funky, artsy aesthetic, and we have accumulated a pretty sizable collection of rusted old crap. So we could pretty easily make our compound into like a little slice of Bisbee in Death Valley. Boy, I'm not kidding. It seems like almost every house here has some kind of crazy artwork on it. Like the mural in front of this place. Or how about the mural here? Look at that. That's isn't that Robert Johnson, who sold his soul to the devil in exchange for becoming a blues badass? Right next to Frank Zappa. Is that Chuck Berry, Jimi Hendrix, Buddy Holly, the Rolling Stones, Jim Morrison, not sure who that is, Bob Dylan, Janis Joplin. Just painted on the front wall of this random house at the top of this random street in the middle of this random hill. That's another thing about walking around Bisbee. You're gonna burn a few calories, but fortunately there's plenty of places to get good food. I think I put on about 10 pounds since I've been here, going around and trying all the local delicacies with my friend. So I definitely need to walk around and take as many of these stairs as I can. I guess a lot of the people who live here use golf carts to get around because the streets are so narrow. Let me tell you, it was something getting my ginormous Toyota 4Runner up to my friend's house. I mean, you think it's like San Francisco. Well, it's like San Francisco on steroids, or whatever the reverse of steroids is. Or maybe it's more like Mayberry on acid. That pretty much sums it up. You know, this place also kind of reminds me of the Hollywood Hills. Like if you watch that video I made where I hiked up to the Hollywood sign, and me and my friend had to drive up that really narrow, windy road to the top of the Hollywood Hills, I guess. It kind of had a similar vibe, although you didn't really see stuff like this in the Hollywood Hills. I'm pretty sure there's some kind of douchebag HOA that would prevent you from building a badass entrance to your property like this. Look at that. Everything is upstairs here. This little stairway going up to these people's house. And so they decorated it by jamming all this random stuff, I guess, into Quikrete on the front of this wall. I'm really curious how this technique is accomplished because, like I said, my sister and I have accumulated a ton of funky bric-a-brac that we could do something similar to this at our Death Valley compound. Look at that. It's a little piece of an old cast iron stove and a glass insulator and a coffee pot and whatever these things were. You know, how hard could it be? Or how about this place? I love the paint scheme. I love brightly colored buildings with funky little accents, like that awesome planter with a mosaic on it. And speaking of mosaics, I've seen some absolutely amazing mosaics here, just pasted on the front of people's houses. Like this here, I guess, isn't technically a mosaic, but they did the same thing. They, I guess, spread Quikrete or something over the front of this retaining wall, and then they just jammed all kinds of funky glass stuff into it, like this glass bottle shaped like a fish, or these grapes, or these beautiful blue bottles, faces, all kinds of crazy stuff just jammed in the rock. And then look over on this side. This is cool. It's more of a natural look, stone wall, but they got these terracotta shapes and just sort of stuck them in amongst the rocks with a bunch of other random stuff. Okay, I told you it was a hippie town, but I just love the idea of all these faces looking out of the wall. I think that's a really cool idea, and it's also something that I plan to crib for the Death Valley compound. Oh, look, there's like this little alcove in the wall that they put this little thing with like people holding hands. Oh, I just love that. I'm a maximalist, so I like to cram something interesting into every nook and cranny, which if you've ever seen our Death Valley compound, well, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, you can see the houses here are all pretty well cared for, but they've also kept a lot of the old rustic elements. So I kind of feel like they struck just the right balance. You know, instead of just ignoring or forgetting their mining history, they have all that mining equipment down in the town park, and then people seem to really have embraced elements of Bisbee's history. And so I think if you can achieve that balance, well, I'm probably stupid for saying this, but maybe you can kind of please everybody. The old-time preservationists that don't want anything to change because it's always been this way, and the hordes of hippie artists, and I don't know if I would call them gentrifiers, because I feel like this place hasn't really been gentrified. It's still pretty rustic, and I guess that's part of its appeal. Hey guys, don't worry, I'm just walking by. Okay, apparently this is a public thoroughfare, because I walked this way with my friend the other day, and he lives here, so he would know, but that's what's so interesting. This is an actual public thoroughfare that you can walk down if you live here, or even if you're just poking around Bisbee. And it's like a little maze of pathways and staircases that lead you all over town. Oh, I love that shrine. And I love the way they have a chair in front of it so you can just sit there and meditate or pray or smoke a doob. I don't know. Isn't this mural amazing? I mean, the paint is so vibrant, and I guess that's because it was just painted in 2023 by Paul and Jesse Verdugo. But oh my God, I just think bright pops of color like this really add to the landscape, especially when juxtaposed against this old rock wall and under this old sort of rock overhang. And you know, there's elements of the old and the new. I love how they have the pi sign on their street number, which is 314. Okay, well, anyway, you might be watching this and saying to yourself, oh gee, Wonderhusy, that looks like the kind of place my wife would like to visit and spend a bunch of money on art and knickknacks. But what's in it for me? Well, there's another town just on the other side of the highway that's technically part of Bisbee that just might have something for you. This is Lowell, and it might be more up your alley. Okay, believe it or not, Lowell is part of the city of Bisbee. Even though all the artsy-fartsy stuff is over in what they call Old Bisbee, which happens to be about a mile away on the other side of the ginormous Lavender Pit. Okay, I guess what happened is, back in the mining days, there were two separate towns, Bisbee and Lowell. And I get the impression that Lowell was kind of more rough and tumble, blue collar kind of a town. But unfortunately for Lowell, as they were excavating this giant open copper mining pit, it sort of ate up most of the town site of Lowell. And so all that's left today is this one street called Eerie Street that I guess the city of Bisbee has paid to sort of restore as an exact replica of an old downtown street in 1950s America. I mean, look at all these amazing classic cars. What do you guys think this is? It's a Chevrolet. Look at that. 34 cents a gallon. Like I said, the good old days. Anyway, this entire street is lined with amazing vintage American cars and vintage American storefronts like you would have seen walking down a main street in any town USA circa 1950. So if you're into classic cars, well, this is a must stop. In fact, while your wife is browsing through all the boutiques and art galleries in Bisbee, you can be over here geeking out to these old cars like a man. I mean, look at these things. Looks like maybe a 57 Chevrolet Bel Air. Oh, here we've got a beautiful powder blue Edsel. How about that? When's the last time you saw an Edsel Corsair? And in this condition. Anyway, I guess the deal here is they have like some kind of motorcycle rally here once a year. I mean, there's a HarleyDavidson repair sign. It's not actually a HarleyDavidson repair shop, just a sign. And then there's an old Lowell HarleyDavidson storefront there, which is also not an actual HarleyDavidson dealership, although this is an actual badass turquoise Chevy Custom 10. I guess that's the name of the model, but it looks like it could carry the entire Little League team in the backseat with no seatbelts on while mom is driving and smoking a cigarette and maybe even chugging a beer. Anyway, like I was saying, this isn't a HarleyDavidson dealership anymore, even though there are some badass vintage bikes parked in the window, I guess just sort of like on display. And not just Harleys, we've also got some Indians. Any Indian bike fans out there? Look at this picture in the back. Beautiful Samantha Morgan, the only female acrobatic motordrome rider in the world. Woo woo! What a beauty! Anyway, like I was saying, I guess they have a bike rally here once a year, but other than that, I guess these cars are just parked here and there's all these cool old gas pumps and gas station signs just for people to do what I'm doing, which is walk around and take pictures. Pretty cool. So, like I was saying, there's something for everyone in Bisbee, whether your jam is weird hippie art or classic Americana. Well, there's something for both him and her. Or if you're like me, well, you're gonna have to spend at least a couple of days here. Because believe it or not, I've barely even scratched the surface when it comes to showing you all the sides of Bisbee. You can also take a tour of the Copper Queen mine, another one of the big gold mines out here, and you can go underground and wear a hard hat and do that whole thing. There's plenty of places to eat, there's plenty of places to drink, and there's plenty of amazing people watching. But don't take my word for it. Come on down and check it out for yourself. Okay, I gotta wrap this up because I gotta go back to my friend's house, help him move a washer-dryer combo, and then we're going to dinner for tacos in Mexico. That's right, we're only 11 miles north of the border, and so apparently there's some amazing taco shop down in old Mexico. So I'm about to go international. But I sure hope you enjoyed this tour of quirky, historic Bisbee and Lowell.